Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 here in Miles of Training. I'm your host, Penny Royston, and today we're going to talk about intrastate versus interstate. Do you know the difference? Oddly enough, a lot of people really don't know the difference and how important it is to know the difference. We know interstates cross state lines, so that might give us a little hint. However, it's not an end all be all. So that's what we're going to talk about today is so by the end of this podcast, you will absolutely know whether your shipment is intrastate or interstate. Every day, hundreds of people apply for authority with the FMCSA. They get a DOT, some get an MC number, some get a freight forwarder number, which is an FF, and they might not really know if it's correct or not. They just know they thought they knew they wanted a DOT number. Get that all the time. But it goes a little deeper than that with the application. I know the application is not intuitive. I mean, it has pictures. So you might think, okay, yeah, I think I've got trucks going into a warehouse. Yes. But technically, I'm not a freight forwarder. So, by the end of the application, you may have not done it correctly. And don't feel bad because it's not a very good system. The FMCSA knows it's not a very good system, and they're working on improving it. But for today, this is what we have to work with. But all in all, even before you do the application, you should have a basic knowledge of the difference between interstate and intrastate. So the difference between the two totally depends on the origin and destination of the commodity. Okay, I'm going to say that again. The difference between interstate and interstate totally depends on the origin and destination of the product that you're hauling. It has nothing to do with where you started and where you ended up. So I really want to make that clear. And let's just do a very basic definition of interstate and intrastate. So and I used to get this confused in the very beginning of my career here because you think maybe that's within state lines, but typically interstate crosses state lines or is a furtherance, and we're going to discuss that in a little bit, is a furtherance of an interstate shipment, whereas intra is within the state and is not a furtherance of an interstate shipment. So let's go back to the ICC, and they were in existence for 108 years, and they regulated trains, trucks, buses, water carriers, freight forwarders, and pipelines. Also, they regulated the telephone industry and travel bureaus. It was a different world back then, and it was before air transportation. So it didn't include, the rules never included, if something came in by air. That is not a furtherance of an interstate shipment because remember, interstate authority governed by the FMCSA is surface and subsurface. It has nothing to do with air. So that's a whole different realm. And you can find all these regulations in the 49 CFR parts 300 to 399. And it's a good idea to kind of skim through it. I know it's difficult to skim through it because it's written by lawyers and some of it, is a little convoluted. And what does this mean exactly? But there's a lot of resources on the internet these days that kind of give the basic idea of what that certain federal regulation means. But you need to know the difference because it can increase your revenues. And it can decrease your liabilities, because you're going to know if you're intrastate, that may determine what permits you're going to need. And you don't want to get caught at a port of entry without the right permits. And so that's where this will decrease your liability because you won't be fined because you've got the right permits. And most transportation in the United States is interstate. It just is. So let's go through a couple of examples of what an interstate shipment is. So let's say you start out in Amarillo, Texas, and you're heading straight to El Paso. Well, the most direct route is through New Mexico. So since you're going from Texas to New Mexico back into Texas, even though the origin and destination are within the same state, you're traveling in another state. So that would make this shipment an interstate shipment and not an intra. Now, if you did another route, let's say you went from Amarillo and you had to do a drop off in Dallas and then out to El Paso, okay, that may be an interstate ship or an intrastate shipment if it's not a furtherance of an interstate shipment. So let's say you're transporting fuel from a pipeline fuel oil depot to other points within the same state. Well, remember, a pipeline is subsurface, and chances are whatever's flowing through that pipeline, like we'll just say fuel oil, probably came from another state, may have even come from Canada. So since that origin of the commodity was in a different state or a different country, that would be considered a furtherance of an interstate shipment, even though you pick it up at the fuel oil depot and you may only truck it 300-400 miles within the same state. So that's a furtherance. So that would be an interstate shipment. Here's another example. Let's say you're going to pick up cars from a rail yard and you're going to take it, you're going to haul these cars from the rail yard to a dealership or, another point within the same state. Even though you're not leaving the state, it's still a furtherance of an interstate shipment because the cars came in from a rail yard. Chances are, if it came in by rail, it came in from another state. So I think you're kind of getting the gist here. So my dad, Rex Evilsizor, pounded this in my head, not literally, but figuratively speaking. It was always a furtherance of an interstate shipment. So where did the commodity begin? Probably not local, another country, another state came through the pipeline, and that's a furtherance. Another example of a furtherance of an interstate shipment is when you go to the Port of Houston. You may go to the Port of Oakland. You may go to Port of Miami. So those big ships bringing in goods from another country, is docking, and then you're picking up the shipment there at the port of entry. That's a furtherance of an interstate. It's actually an international shipment. So that is also considered interstate. So if you pick up something at one of the Port of Houstons, there's two of them, you pick it up there and you take it to Dallas, that's an interstate shipment. You need to have an MC number with that. You need to be marked on your DOT record as an interstate for hire carrier. So an intrastate is just a little different. An intrastate could be within a commercial zone. If the small city is between, sits on a state line, you may not be an interstate shipment. And here's another example of an intrastate. Let's say you manufacture tires, within your state. And so you're going to pick up, you've got a contract with that tire company, and you're going to pick up those tires and you're going to truck them about 50, 60 miles away or further, could be a little further, but you're going to stay within the same state. That's an intrastate. Let's say you're a moving company. So you're going to go to someone's house, you're going to pack their house up, let's say here in Denver, and they're going to move down to Colorado Springs. That's an intrastate shipment because it's not a furtherance. You're starting in Denver with the home, all the Homes Goods there in Denver, pack up the truck, and you're going to take it down to the new house. So whether anything is interstate or intrastate, remember, it totally depends on the origin and destination of the commodity. If you don't come out with anything from this podcast but that, it's a win-win. It has everything to do with the commodity. So think about, when you're looking for loads on a load board or something, it's like, okay, is this a furtherance of an interstate shipment? It's interstate if it comes in by rail, if it comes in by pipeline, and if it comes in by ship. Those are all going to be interstate. Also, if it comes in as a freight forwarder. So, as a freight forwarder, similar sort of, like a broker, except they do have a warehouse where they can break down the shipments and they can reconsolidate them into other trucks and go pretty local. So think about that. So just know that most transportation regulations that we're using today were originally written at a time when all transportation was under the ICC. Not a lot has changed. It's just the methodology has changed on how to do certain things. So it could be detrimental for an interstate or intrastate carrier moving a shipment and not checking to see if the movement is or isn't a furtherance of an interstate shipment. So you need to read the regulations. So here I'm going to go ahead and read 49 CFR 390.5. And it says interstate commerce means trade, traffic, or transportation in the United States. So number one, between a place in a state and a place outside of such state, including a place outside of the United States. So it could go to, another country. Or number two, between two places in a state through another state or a place outside of the United States. So that's the furtherance of an interstate shipment that we talked about, rail, ship, or pipeline. Or it could be between two places in a state as part of trade, traffic, and transportation originating or terminating outside the state or United States. Intrastate commerce means any trade, traffic, or transportation in any state which is not described in the term interstate commerce. So really understand that term, interstate commerce. So I hope this little podcast helped you with learning the difference between inter and intrastate. If you have any questions, give us a call at 303-482-2965. We'd be glad to help with that. Most people do work just interstate. Some people like to start out as an intrastate carrier, just some local shipments, within your city. And check with your state because some states do have extra requirements other than just getting a DOT number. I know Texas does. Illinois has extra permits that are involved. In most states, if you're a household goods carrier, that changes the game a little bit. You've got to have both. California, of course, we all know California has loads of regulations, more than probably any other state in the union. So I'm going to end with this today. The difference between interstate or intrastate totally depends on the origin and destination of what you're hauling. It matters what's in the trailer, not where your vehicle starts and ends. So I hope you found this really interesting. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.